Welcome everyone and welcome to the Voice of the Unseen. Today with us we have Shulamit Elson. Shulamit Elson is a contemporary Kabbalist that has been working with the um, sound and vocal sound in particular for over 30 years. It is non non-denominational sound. It's a sound made with intention and that have a specific intent or kavanah, or we aim to a specific result. The sound can bring states of peace, joy, and also state of gnosis and direct experience of the divine when practiced regularly. So today, Shulamit is gonna take us over her life story, how the sound came to her, how which tradition they're rooted in, and we will have a discussion about sound, the state of the world, ecstatic Kabbalah, the role of women in Kabbalistic tradition, and a demonstration and maybe a small practice of sound. Welcome, Shulamit.
Thank you very much for having me, Shayana.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's an honor to be here with you. Maybe you want to take us over in this first part on what happened to you. So, from what I know about you, you've been my teacher for almost 10 years now, for more than 10 years. I've been practicing the sound since 2015 that you taught me. And it's been wonderful for my own life. And at this point, we would like to introduce you to the world. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how the sound came to be, how you receive them. And yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'll start from the beginning, sort of from the beginning. I was raised in a religious home, and I was raised after the war, that is World War II, when things were actually kind of calm and prosperous for about a decade, from the end of the war into the late 50s. And so things were very stable, and women had a specific role which was not questioned, um, you know, marry and have children and so on. Um, I was well educated. My parents provided well for me in that area, but I was very feisty, I was very adventurous. I was very spirited. I guess that's another way of saying I was a real pain. But I was very anxious to spread my wings and see the world and whatever. And well, I mean, you don't know very much when you're young, you just get these ideas in your head. And I was a great reader. I read a lot, a lot, a lot. And I had very romantic ideas about, you know, artists and writers and so forth. And particularly the people who were in Paris after the war, the Americans, Ernest Hemingway and James Joyce and so forth. Anyway, I went to university. I went to New York University, and after I got out of school, I went to Europe to have my adventure, which I did. I fell in love with an artist, and he was actually an American guy that I met actually in New York. And so I was in Paris for about a year. I was in Spain for a couple of months, in Morocco for a couple of months. So basically, I was away from New York for about 2 years, and but I wasn't. I was trying to be a writer, and I didn't have the ability to sit still long enough, patience, that's required for doing that kind of activity. And at a certain point, I realized that I had to get my life together because I was becoming a person who just showed up in cafes. And I was young, so I was what, I don't know, 23 or something like that. So I actually had plenty of time, but I did meet people who stayed too long, way too
Mm.
long, and I didn't see that their lives had gone anywhere. So anyway, at a certain point, I picked myself up and went home, and my romance fell apart, and I was actually completely and totally devastated by that. I didn't think I could live, and well, obviously, I'm still here, but at the time, I
Yeah.
didn't think that I could live, and I got very sick. I got very, very sick. I got a I well, I skipped a part. I came home to New York and set about getting a job, and in those days, it was pretty hard for a woman. I mean, to be anything but a secretary, and I couldn't type. So, I ended up actually on Wall Street as a stock clerk and made my way up to a stock analyst, but whatever. At the time, that's what I was. I was a stock clerk, and I got very, very sick with a kidney disease for which there was no known cure and which would have resulted on the trajectory that I was on in kidney failure. So it would be a machine, that you would have to be on. And
Dialysis.
yeah, and they just started with transplants at the time. So it was very new.
Mhm.
But I was 23, 24 years old, and I was looking, to like really being in bad shape by the time I was in my 30s. But anyway, I took some very, very powerful drugs, which to this day, I have no clue whether they did any good at all, but they made my life a complete and total misery. So it was cortisone, which is well known, but I took
Mhm.
massive doses of it. So my face changed. Like it gets very round, and I started to have skin problems, acne, and so on, which you get with this particular drug. And I also had a lot of bodily problems. I mean, I used to say it was like the afflictions of Job. There was like no part of my body that was spared. But the main thing was my face. I was in the sense that that was the most devastating thing to me. And I would go out on, I would go on the street sometimes and I would meet people who were acquaintances of mine, not great friends, but people who knew me and they didn't recognize me. And I began to say, well, who am I if I'm not my face? And I made this commitment that if I would ever get better, that I would devote myself to something worthwhile. I had no idea what that was.
Mhm.
No idea whatsoever. Um, but I made that decision. And I have always believed that if I did not devote myself to a life that was worthwhile, that I would become very sick again. Anyway, after a year of taking the medicine, I said to the doctor, "I don't wanna do this anymore." He said, "Your body's not a clock," because most of my symptoms were coming from the medicine itself.
Mm.
But I said, "No, no, I wanna stop." So I stopped, and about a year after that, I had a spontaneous remission, and I never got sick again from that illness.
Wow.
Um, Couple of years later, I forgot to mention that I had married in between and had a child, and, that was very rewarding. Um, but I had a tubal pregnancy about 3 years after that and almost died again, and I thought to myself, "What's going on here? I'm not a sick person?" Anyway, I just dedicated myself to try to find out what I was doing, and I had no idea of how to go about it. I had no idea what I was looking for, and I had no idea how to find it. Nevertheless, and by the way, if you tell anybody else about this, they don't understand what you're talking about, you know? You just
Yeah.
this is what all there is. You see what it's all there is. You
Only work and
have a family,
yes.
you get old, you play golf, you retire, you die. It's very, 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 simple path, and, but I stuck to it, who knows why. I stuck to it, and I kept looking, and I examined a lot of other paths. I mean, I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish home, but I didn't, didn't have that much awareness about other types of spiritual paths, so I was investigating that. but I didn't really find anything that I particularly responded to.
Mhm.
And I went along like that, once 2 steps forward, like the Russian proverb, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I didn't know what I was doing. And, and, I just kept going, that's all I can tell you. At a certain point, I separated from my husband, I got divorced, and I met my current husband around that time, and he was, doing well financially, and I decided that I would take a break from my job, which at that point was in a Wall Street firm where I was working, raising money for companies who were looking for capital, and, that was like a square peg in a round hole, it was such
Never worked.
uncomfortable fit for me, very uncomfortable. Anyway, I started, in those days, there was no talk of meditation. I mean, obviously, it existed, but in,
So we're talking about the 60s or early 60s?
no, this is no, not the '60s, this was more the '80s or something like that. Yeah, there were people who were probably doing it in that movement, but I was not part of that movement, so I never heard
Of the New Age movement of meditation and yoga. But by the 80s also it kind of like died down.
and I never was part of the drug culture, so I miss that, by the way, just generationally.
Oh, okay.
Generationally, I was born in 1942, so
Mhm.
generationally, that was not something
You
that
were,
was very new.
yeah, you
Anyway,
were already 30s, like in your 30s when it
and,
happened.
and
Yeah.
I felt a little, behind the times. I don't think I tried, I think I had my first marijuana cigarette when I was probably 35 or something, and I had an allergy to it, kept sneezing. I never did that again. Anyway, I found a little book called The Relaxation Response, which was by a Harvard MD, and it was trying to help men who were having heart attacks to learn how to relax. And he had a little meditation technique in there, and I tried it, and I immediately had an impact. Immediately, I don't know, suddenly in other realms, Very pleasant, by the way, very more than pleasant. Very, like, all of a sudden, I felt the kind of wholeness that I never felt before. And
Mhm.
so it was a very simple technique, something you could learn from a book, some breaths. I actually don't remember much about it now, but I did pursue it. And, now you have to understand at the same time, I mean, I was living a normal life, so-called normal life, with a job and a husband and, a task and all that, but at the same time, underneath, there was always this kind of yearning and this looking and this not finding and this discomfort, always a discomfort. Why I'm not fitting in, why don't you know, why can't I don't know, be like everybody else, What's my problem? Why can't I accept the way things are? And,
Mhm.
in the course of doing these meditations, one day I started to hear these sounds, and they were very enticing. They were very mysterious, and they grabbed me in the sense that I wanted to know more, I wanted to experience it, but I had no clue what it meant. And
Okay.
the same way that this stuff has been going on for thousands of years, I'm talking about these incantations and whatever,
Yes.
I had never heard of it, right? I had absolutely no idea, but it was intriguing enough for me to try to practice it, and I did go. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan at the time. The living room was on the hall. I didn't want the sounds to be heard, so I would go into the bedroom and shut the door, and I would practice them. And again, I had no context, but I started doing them for small groups of people, kind of feeling my way, and all of my other gifts, which I had kept hidden from myself in a way, my
Mhm.
intuition, my ability to see into other people, I guess for want of a better word, the psychic gifts, those kinds of
Mhm.
abilities started to come more to the forefront. And I noticed that using the sounds, I could also read people's energy, with the combination of the sounds and my own innate abilities, so to speak. So it started to grow, and I was very interested in it, but I didn't have a form for it. In other words, the sounds had come from some other realm. And I don't think it's, by the way, that atypical for people who meditate to have experiences from other realms and for gifts to
Yeah.
come to them from other realms. I'm talking just about, so-called ordinary people, you know.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you stop the noise in your head. You stop talking to yourself. You stop recreating the world according to the way you have formed it or you've been taught or whatever. You stop for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden, there's this whole other terrain that opens up for you, So that's what happened to me. So now
So how did you sorry. How did you feel when you received the sound? Do you remember? Like, what was the feeling in your body? Were you scared? Were you happy? Was it like good?
I wasn't scared, but I was incredibly intrigued. I was like, "What is this? And what am I supposed to do with it? Why
Mm.
was it given to me? And what is it? And why is it so compelling? What is it about it that's so compelling?" It's just weird, right? That's the way I reacted. This is weird. And I
Okay.
would present myself to other people that way. I have this thing that happened to me, or I have this gift that I have, and it's so weird, you know? So, surprise, surprise, that's how people reacted to me.
Yeah.
I was ambivalent and they responded in kind. No, I wasn't afraid of it. I pursued it. It was like,
So how did you know that it was something special? Like,
well, it felt very special. I should mention that through my life, I've had a lot of visions,
mhm.
and those visions kind of indicated there would be something special. So I it was unusual for sure. Nobody in my circle of people ever heard, or at least never spoke of it or never heard of it.
Yeah.
And yet it had this kind of like, well, it was like a gift from the other realms. I
Yeah,
can't,
that's good enough.
it's
Yeah.
good enough. And besides which, what can I try to find out what this is and why it happened to me? And not me, like me out of the world, but like why did it happen to me? I mean,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, yeah, why you have this gift, like, or how come like you were chosen for it?
Exactly.
Like,
And
yeah.
what does that mean that you were chosen for it? So in by the same token, my sensitivity to the world increased to a
Mhm.
point of great discomfort. So,
Okay.
you start knowing things about people, or you come into a room and you feel the energy of that place. If it's not a good energy. I think
Mhm.
that that was always true. I mean, I've been in places where just by happenstance, where they were, a day after I left, terrible riots and stuff like that, and you could feel it. You could feel the air like
Yeah.
glass. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever experienced that. You can feel it,
Yeah.
but anyway, I became very, very sensitive, and it became really hard. So it was a question of, I'm going after this gift, and I can see that it's bringing me to some other level of awareness, and that level of awareness was not comfortable for me, right? So I'm trying to figure
I
how to protect myself when you have that degree of sensitivity.
Yeah, and also like it's like a change of consciousness that happened once you started practicing the sound. It awakened you or opened your field to more more recep- receptivity, I guess. Yeah, you were more receptive.
You're more receptive, and you shed some of your defenses.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly children don't walk around with defenses. I mean, these are things that we acquire in order to go through life. And,
Mhm.
if we put on this clothing in order to protect ourselves, that's not a bad thing. It's just all of a sudden, you think, "Oh my god, this isn't what I've been doing isn't real." It isn't, I'm being protected against something that I really need to know or see. So I
Mhm.
had to learn how to manage the gift and to share it with others, which is very important, and at the same time not to be crushed by it or destroyed by it, because I did feel that way. I mean, if I gave a presentation, I would be often needing to come home and hide for a week or 2, because I was
Yeah.
raw. But anyway, I just want to add that I had the gift of the sounds. I was testing them out, but I was trying to find some kind of context for them, not just
Yeah.
something I had received from the other realms, but something that was grounded on this earth that described it. And I ran across a book called The Book of Formation or Sefer Yetzirah, which is about
Mhm.
Kabbalah. And it talked about the tree of life, which is a symbol that you can find in the story of the creation in the Bible. And the mystics took the image of the tree and developed a whole system around it with energy fields and so on. And so Kaplan describes this, and he's a scholar, so everything is annotated. Everything
Mhm.
everything has
You mean Ari Kaplan, no?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So, everything that he did was done in a scholarly way, which means that there were citations from various books and literature and so forth. And, so he had one chapter and talking about the various energy fields. And in the middle of the chapter, he had one paragraph, actually, it was one sentence paragraph, and it said that there were some Kabbalists who believed that sound could be associated with the various energy fields. And he had not a single citation. Nothing, nothing.
Okay.
But I decided to try to track this down. So I made lots of calls to various, esoteric libraries and so on, and nobody either knew what I was talking about or would admit to knowing what I was talking about. I couldn't find it. And then in, I can't remember what year, 2000 or something, I was in Jerusalem and I met a man who was knowledgeable, and I mentioned what I was looking for, and he said, "Oh, that." It was like, like I said, "I left my umbrella. Did I leave it here?" He said, "Yeah, it's in that book over there in the corner. You could go get that book." So that book,
What was the book?
it's called, Sefer HaNikud, or the Book of the Vowel Points, or the Book of the Dots.
Mhm.
It's very short. This, rabbi's name was Joseph Gikatia. Was a student of Abraham Abulafia. Abulafia
Mhm.
worked with sound, and
Okay.
Ikatia wrote down his teachings and I guess did some investigation of his own and came up with this book. And the book basically says, "This sound is for this emanation." There are 10 emanations on the tree. "This sound
Mhm.
is for this emanation," and so on. So he had that's the book. I mean, it's just
Okay.
one sound, one emanation. And I learned how to connect the sounds and also to create a system where you could use the sounds as a ladder to ascend in terms of consciousness, to become basically your ascension is to become whole, to become one,
Mhm.
right? To know, so I came up with a system based on those teaching, but the teaching gave me a construct, gave me a
Framework. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
to put a framework exactly to put the sounds in. So with that, the work became much deeper,
Mm.
and yeah, so you have this incredible power in your voice, and the voice is very holy. I mean, Rudolf Steiner said that in the future times, he wrote in the 19th century, I think, or the 20th.
Mhm.
The future times, all we'd be giving birth with our voices. You know, it's the most spiritual aspect of your being. Of course, we tarnish it with our bad speech, but the fact is,
Yeah.
in the system that I'm using, you can use the voices that are emanating from the throat to ascend to a very high level of consciousness, to go beyond the boundaries of your body, so to speak. And this is available to everybody, not just to, it's available. You have to learn how to use it, of course, but
Yeah.
and you have to practice. But it's very powerful for not only settling emotional problems, but sometimes helping with physical problems when they're because, when you're sick, you do like, if you have a injury to your back and you might have hurt
Mhm.
your I don't know, you may have hurt your shoulder, but in order to go through the day, you start making all these adjustments in your body to compensate and to support your shoulder, so by the time you're finished, you're actually your whole body feels terrible, so this
Yeah.
the sounds are helping to smooth and to remove the emotional aspect of your suffering and so on. So it can be used for physical reasons. I've had it occasionally. It's not a cure-all by any means, but I have had occasions where I've been able to cure myself of something very harsh. For example, sciatica. I did actually, heal myself from a very bad sciatic attack with the system using sound. So sometimes it works very effectively for illness, especially
Mhm.
if it has an emotional component. And it's for the emotional side of things, of course, we have a very skewed view of ourselves and we have a very poor understanding of the way the world actually works. And we're very hard on ourselves. I mean, there's a million things that we do that are not helpful to our happiness or to solving problems. So the sounds can help this because they remind you. Plato said all knowledge is remembering. You remember. You're not a million things. You're one person. You're not what's happening on the surface. You're what's happening in your depth. You know?
S- So, when you talk about changing consciousness or alteration of state of consciousness, have you ever had a direct experience of divinity through the sound? Like how, and if yes, did it, how long did it take? Because of practice, did you have to combine the sound with techniques of purifying yourself, mentally, physically, diet, or like we do in plant medicine, or is it spontaneously that it happened just by you using the different sound and the combination of sound? Like how?
I think that it's both. In my case, I was given a gift, and then the gift was there, and then you want more of it.
Mm,
You get a taste of divinity. You get a taste of a kind of nectar. You get that taste, and you want more of it, and so you have to
true.
go look for it because after that, it's not given. After that, you have to work. You have to work, and what does a work mean? I didn't do any special diet. My diet changed, I think, as a result of the work, but not the other way around.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that, but I did try to lead. I'm not a moralist. I'm certainly not perfect, but I tried to lead a decent a decent life, a more correct life.
Hmm.
So, because you do have to clean up your act. You do. If you wanna receive so well, at least this is my experience. You get a taste of something so delicious, so sweet, that you want to taste it your whole life. So now you have to figure out how you're gonna go find that. And you begin to notice that there are certain habits of mind that are actually destructive to that,
So it began.
and you want
Did
to
it
get rid of
become?
them. For example, it can be very mundane. Gossip, okay?
Yeah.
Let's take gossip. Um, I mean, gossip can be kind of fun. I mean, I'm not above that. On the other hand, when I did gossip, and I was never much of a gossip, I felt very, very uncomfortable. I felt that I had debased myself by talking about another
Yeah.
person in a bad way, you know?
Mhm.
So so it pulled me down. It pulls you off the path. That's one example. Another is could be jealousy or greed or any of these emotions.
Yeah, it reduce your frequency and your
They they
vibration.
they pull you off the path. I mean, you talk about
Yeah.
it like that. I talk about it just like you pull down to another level and you're taken away from the light. And it's
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah.
I what I wanted was worth more than doing that. So I
Yeah.
tried to amend my behavior. So then you start with amending your behavior, and then you go to, "Well, I have to amend my thoughts," right? So at that point, I started doing a self-observation practice, which was
Mhm.
very powerful and very, very effective. So,
Can
uh,
you tell us more a little bit about the self-observation practice?
yeah. So I had an incident or whatever, however you wanna describe it. I spent a lot of years with an internal rant. I mean, in other words, a yelling inside my mind, a discussion, which wasn't a discussion. It was very familiar. I'd done it 1,000 times before. It was about the injustices that I had experienced as a child, right? And it would go over and
Mhm.
over again, and I would get really, really, really upset. Not a little upset, really
Mhm.
upset. My mouth would become dry. My heart would be thumping, beating really fast, and I was a complete bitch because if you asked me to pass the salt, I would erupt, you know?
Yeah.
I just was it was all like internal pressure. Okay. So this happened periodically. It wasn't like, all the time, but it happened periodically. It was familiar. And one day and I was living in the country, so where I am now, so I don't know, could be 25, 30 years ago. There were no phones at that time. There were no mobile phones,
Mhm.
no car phones.
Yeah, so 30 years and 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that it was that soon, but,
Mhm.
sorry, I have to so it was a beautiful day, and I was happy, and I was
Mhm.
singing, which I do when I'm happy, and I went out to the car. I was driving somewhere, I don't know where. I was alone. I had no upsetting anything happened to me. Nothing. Nothing had happened to me that was
Mhm.
upsetting. I got in the car, I drove away, and at some point in the journey my noticed that my lips were really dry, my heart was beating wildly, and I was in this I don't even wanna call it a discussion. I was in some kind of discussion in my head trying to get some justice some justice out of a family situation. And I don't know why, but for the first time in my life, I thought, "What? Why am I going on like that? Nothing happened." And for some peculiar reason, the whole dialogue stopped, like, it was like taking a needle off a record on a record player or
Mhm.
turning off the sound on a radio. It's on 1 minute, and the next minute it's completely off, and it was gone. The whole rant was gone, and I
Mhm.
thought to myself, "Wow, that's strange." And then, a little while later, maybe I don't know, a week or 2 later, the same thing happened again, the same exact thing. The rant, the realization of the rant, the stopping of the rant, and the fading of the rant, and I thought to myself, "Hmm, that's kind of interesting. I think I'm gonna watch this." And I discovered that this internal upset actually happened more frequently than I thought it did,
Yeah.
and it was so unpleasant. It was so unpleasant. And so I just watched it, and I discovered that when I observed it and by the way, this is a scientific principle from quantum mechanics, that what you observe changes.
Yeah.
So I began to observe this, and it just started to change. I didn't the key thing was I made no judgment. I didn't say, "You idiot, why are you doing this again?" I did not try to analyze it because I understood why I was doing it. I mean, I had been in therapy. I knew what I knew I was doing it, you know. I just kept watching it, and every time I looked at it, it stopped. And then I don't know how long it took. It must have been ready to pop because all of a sudden I had this very, very clear understanding that this was an activity that I pursued when I was trying to avoid something uncomfortable. So, in other words, it was my protection. It was a protection that I had developed when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and, uh, and I used it throughout my life, even though it wasn't very effective, you know, everything, but though it was actually fundamentally useless or worse because it made me very ill-tempered. And I have to tell you that, well, the first thing I thought to myself is, if I don't wanna face something uncomfortable, why do I wanna put myself through this? It's much better to just say, "I don't wanna look at that right now," you know?
Yeah.
And the behavior and the thought pattern stopped completely. I was I mean, I have been troubled by it again, but very rarely, because 'cause I'm onto its game. The minute it starts,
Yeah.
I just say, "Oh gosh, I'm doing that again," and it stops. Anyway, having discovered this procedure, I started to apply it to other areas of my life, and gradually I became freer and freer and freer of these habitual negative responses. And after I looked at the behavior that I described that was so uncomfortable, I started looking at other behaviors like placating, you know.
Can you explain this one? Yeah.
Well, like if you were gonna go visit the king and ask him for
Mhm.
a favor, you would bring gifts. You might think the king was a terrible human being, a horse's ass, a tyrant, a creep, but you would go with a smile and you would bow and you would bring a gift because you're
Mhm.
trying to placate him. You're trying to get him to, calm down, treat you good,
Yes.
right? Well, this is a behavior that many people carry. Maybe I don't know if this is true, maybe women more than men, I don't know. Basically just trying to make other people feel good so you don't have to be honest. Now, obviously,
Yes.
if you go before a very powerful person, then it is advisable for you to shut up and bring a gift and hope you get what you want. But
Yeah.
when you carry that around to other people who basically have no power over you, then I'm not so sure it's a good idea. So I began to look at that, and so then you begin to have more freedom of action. So in a certain circumstance, you might be placating or you might be trying to get on the good side of a person, but it's not like an instinctual reaction that you do with everybody to get them to like you know, or to get them not to hurt you, whatever the psychological reasons. So I began to look at those behaviors that apparently were positive but weren't. And I gradually became more comfortable with myself, freer,
Mhm.
and discovered, although it wasn't one of my goals, but people have said this about me, just became more authentic. I became more authentic because I wasn't trying to defend myself constantly and make myself into a pretzel to please other people. So
And
combine Go ahead.
did it help you with the sound to
So
like have this autonomy, like this more authenticity, this truth that is revealing in everyday life?
the sounds have a great power. They are resonating with forces in the universe. They're not verbal. They're not attempting
Mhm.
to explain anything to you. They're not telling you how it is. They're not. And somehow they have the power to even educate your organs and get you into a position of much greater openness and acceptance and clarity. So combining the sounds and their direct effect on your energy centers, your nervous system, your brain activity with an intellectual exercise, which basically gets you to look at your behavior, frees you. I'm not saying you have total freedom because I don't know who does. I'm saying that it gets you freer and happy.
So mhm, it basically takes you out of patterns that are deterministic and fatalistic, and you are able to have more of a freedom of choice
Well, think about
over like.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm saying like it's a more freedom of choice over your life and what you actually like are doing and choosing.
I believe that we all have a core that is steady and knowing and knows our path and what we're meant to do in this life, in the life that you're given. You come into the life and you have parents who've had their own experiences, who are trying to do their best for you, and they're trying to protect you. And sometimes they teach you things that are not necessarily helpful because they come
Mhm.
from another mindset or from a different history or different experience. They try to teach you how to protect yourself. That's one of the big things that parents try to teach you. It's not just, you know, don't cross the street in front of traffic, look both ways. It's what kind of people you deal with and how you set up your life. So you start, and then you have your teachers, and then you have your life experience, and you begin to construct a story about yourself and about your experience, about your place in the world. And and that story works for a while, you know, but you grow. And so sometimes you outgrow the story that you were given. You find out it doesn't really work. It's not really true to you or whatever. If you can get a look beneath that structure that you've created,
Mhm.
which is partially ego, you can sometimes see something more that's more honest to yourself. And then you're not trying to live somebody else's life. I mean, when I was working on Wall Street, I had a job that people envied,
Yeah.
and I was thinking to myself, "Well, what what are they
What am I doing? It's like,
what
what
are
is
they envious?"
this?
I'm thinking, "What am I doing? Am I living somebody else's dream?"
Mhm.
Because it certainly
Yeah, I
wasn't my
relate to
dream.
that.
It wasn't my dream, you know? But if you're trying to fit in, if you're trying not to disappoint people who love you, you know, sometimes you
It's
try
complicated.
to it's complicated. I'm not saying that you should disappoint people or you know, we are part of society and whatever, but there's a way to live which is more honorable to yourself, and therefore, well, there's that old adage, "To thine own self be true," and you can't be false to any man. So you're coming to a place of and it's relaxing, by the way, very relaxing not to try to be somebody else all the time that you're not. And people respond to this. They respond to your relaxation and to your calm. They find it very supportive. So there's a lot of stories they tell you. I mean, they reinforce, you know, coming up, there's a lot of stories in society that turn out to be not true at all.
Yeah. And then, like, once you're your authentic self, you attract the people that are related and accept you for who you are. Also,
Yeah, but they're
like
fewer and
everything becomes much easier. Of course, sorry.
they're fewer and fewer. I mean, you start out with a big pool and you know, narrow it, narrow it, narrow it. It's like when
Yeah.
you're 18, you think you could marry anybody you wanted. There's this huge pie, you know, it could be an airline pilot, a submarine machine guy, a welder or whatever, a prize fighter. I mean, everything is open to you, but that's not really true. In reality, there's just
No.
few people that you can make a life with. So it's a mystery. Life is a mystery. Why you're here is a mystery. But somehow, if you can walk in that mystery and really appreciate it, it's scary too.
Yeah.
A kind of awe, then life becomes exciting and fun, and you remain vibrant till you're very old.
Mhm.
You know,
Definitely.
even if your body starts to fall apart, your soul and your spirit is, you know, is lively. And it allows you to endure a lot of, to endure disappointments and tragedies in a way that's actually easier, I think. Not the grief still is as great, but you're not, confused.
Yeah. Speaking of tragedy, like, I mean, I want to jump quickly on like the current actuality and like what we see in the news and what's happening and how the sound can help um, to cope maybe with all the feelings that we have inside, like all the stress, the anxiety, the fear, especially in the US right now, like a lot of people are living in this fear of being arrested, fear of having um of having to hide, or fear of like where the world is going also. Like with Russia in Europe, like we hear a lot of talk of war coming, like in the next month or so. And maybe there is a way for us to be calm and create a vibration all together that will prevent and change like where we're heading. So do you think the sound can help for that? Like what is your
I
what is your view on that?
Yes, I first of all, as you well know, there's an awful lot of noise. There are many, many people with different opinions. Some of them are very intelligent and thoughtful, and everybody's talking, 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 and yet well, we're in a mess. We're in a chaotic, violent, potentially more violent time. There is definitely reason to fear on many levels, politically, environmentally, with artificial intelligence. There's just and war. There's just everything to fear. There's no question.
Mhm.
So my fe and the sounds, by the way, they have no dogma. They're they're vibrational tones, they're vowel sounds. They have no dogma. They're not telling you how to live. They have no solutions. They have none of that. And I think it is designed for this time because it cuts through all the noise that's going on and brings you to center. Why is that important? Because making noise is not what's gonna I'm not sure. I should step back. I'm not sure anything can be solved here. We're in a some kind of cosmic overthrow of this age. There's a why it happened and so on is another discussion, but this is definitely something that's beyond human control happening here, and it's happening from
Mhm.
many levels. So there's an overturning of the ages. Some people talk about the end times, not just, you know, the Christians, the Jews, the indigenous tribes. There are many prophecies for this time. The place that you need to come to if you're gonna protect yourself and your family and actually have an impact on the world is not so much through your speech, but through your stillness, getting to the core of your being, sitting quietly there. That's the place where you can hear. You can listen and you can hear your own wisdom and the guidance of other beings from other realms about how to behave, what to do. It's calm, calm. And that calm, in addition to taking care of you and your family and your friends, can also potentially radiate out to other groups and begin to get everybody to settle down a little bit. And more importantly, at least from my standpoint, is carrying the principle forward to when this all settles down, which it will at some point. It will all settle
Mhm.
down. And what is that? There are so many principles that have to be carried forward, but one of them is decency. A person who acts with decency is actually a courageous person. Sometimes it takes courage to act with decency. Look at what happened in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. All those people came out and acted for decency, and they made a huge impact. They made a huge impact in Minnesota, which, by the way, the government is stepping back from, but they
Mhm.
also gave hope and a pathway to many other people in this country who are very, very upset about the way things are going. So, the sounds have the ability to cut through the noise. Now, if you're a meditator already, then you should proceed with the meditation that works for you. If there's no need to change, but if you're a person who hasn't been meditating or doesn't like to sit in meditation or whatever, doesn't like the meditations that have been offered to you, then sound meditation, which immediately silences your internal conversation and
Yeah.
gets you to a place of calm, very accessible. You don't need to be a singer, by the way. You don't need a fancy voice. You don't need to be able to keep tune. You just have to have your intention in mind. You have to have a direction for where to put the sound and the sound itself. And you repeat that a few times and you notice a calm descending on you. And you can often notice a connection to some greater reality that's very, very sustaining. And all these arguments about right and left and opinions and whatever all dissolve because our opinions are not going to save us. They're probably going to tank us. Since everybody
Mhm.
knows what the right thing is, when everybody knows what's right, it's not good, right?
Yeah, the question now is not
Yeah,
what is the right thing to do, is that what is true to you and you only, and that comes with lots of work on oneself to know that, and that's why we have the sound and other techniques of meditation or self development and knowledge. Um, so what we can proceed with, I feel like, is maybe a practice of the sound.
Okay, I just wanna make one comment before we do that,
Yeah.
which is one of the teachings that comes out of Kabbalah, is that the sound that you make for your solar plexus at the center of your body
Mhm.
is the sound for truth, and what is truth defined as? Truth is defined as the reconciliation of opposites. You can find peace in yourself also when you stop fighting and warring with the different aspects of your nature and accept that they can exist, coexist, and that you're still one person.
Mhm.
So it's a reconciliation of opposites. It's a profound teaching.
So as a woman, I was really interested in your perception and perspective of women in Kabbalah, because I feel for me you have been a role model into the introduction of Jewish mysticism and Kabbalistic practices as a woman, to embody it and be comfortable in it. And I was wondering about history, about recent times, about like what is the role of women in Kabbalah? Like, what can you tell us about it?
Well, there is no role. I mean, basically, well, of course, when I was coming up, my parents told me that, people who studied Kabbalah went crazy. So it was definitely not encouraged. That wasn't put to me as a woman, that was just a general statement. Of course, nobody suspected my mystical inclinations, least of all me. But, there is no role. Women are considered hysterical and, not worthy of the teaching, and also not able to keep hold of their sanity, because they're so emotional. And,
Mhm.
yeah, so it was forbidden to women, forbidden to men under the age of 40 who did not have children and grounding, who did not have responsibilities in life. But as you probably know, most of the great Kabbalists died before they were 40. So, I think it was really trying to keep people on more of the legalistic path, more the rabbinic path. Um,
Mhm.
so there wasn't any role, but I didn't wanna study it. I never pursued it because it was forbidden, and I didn't feel any desire to question it or to, well, to look into it. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't in my world, but
Well.
I had very consistently vivid visions for a very, very long time, and I needed to find a place for that. I didn't think I was crazy. I didn't think
Mhm.
that, but there was certainly things happening to me that were not approved of in the world that I came from. They've been approved of in other worlds. It's not like I was the only person that ever had visions,
Mhm.
but within my worlds, nobody was interested, and they also derided them. And I had a lot of visions with animals, which nobody understood. If I present them, people would say, "What?" You know,
Yeah.
but I was strong-minded enough to continue. Besides which, the visions were leading me. It wasn't like I had complete control over my fate or my destiny or whatever. I mean, my destiny is to teach these sounds, to bring these sounds.
Yeah.
So I wasn't gonna let anybody stop me. But anyway, once I had found that book, when I was, looking for it, once I finally found the book and other teachings, which are in the Zohar also, um, I just decided to pursue it. I didn't have anybody to teach me. There wasn't a lineage that I could come from because there was no I mean, there are other women who are doing this, but it's
Mhm.
pretty rare. I mean, not doing
Yeah.
sound, but doing other aspects of Kabbalah.
Of Kabbalah, yes.
And there are many, many aspects to Kabbalah. I don't claim to be an expert in any. I
Yes.
know my area, which is the sound.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, so why should, why should the men be the only ones who, have this knowledge? I don't buy that.
I agree with you.
I don't buy
Definitely. Yes. Definitely. I think, and I feel like women have this innate power to receive because after all, Kabbalah, lead Kabbalah mean receiving, or to receive. So they have this innate power of receiving like guidance and knowledge, intuition. And maybe there was lots of fears that if women started to be Kabbalistic, then they don't need the men anymore. Like maybe, who knows?
I don't know, responsibilities and regulations have been put down over centuries,
Yeah.
it's a societal reason. I'm not whatever the reason, I don't buy it. That's all. I don't
Yeah.
buy it, and I there are a lot of other people who don't buy it either. I'm not the only one. You
Mhm.
too, but others as well. So there are,
Yes.
changes in these, but the tradition is very ancient, and there's a lot of wisdom in it, you know? There's a lot of wisdom in it. There's also a lot of opportunities for people to study it in the wrong way and get the wrong ideas. That's also true.
Yeah.
So to be grounded is very important. So it's not enough to lift off into the sky, into the heavens with these sounds, which it can definitely transport you there. But you have to be grounded in this place where you are. The idea is to
Mhm.
bring the spiritual energy and exhibit it and express it through the physical body, which and you have to work for things that you care about. And it doesn't matter what you do, if you're a piano player or a cook. I mean, if you want to be really good at it, you've got to discipline yourself and you've got to do it every day. And you've got to
Mhm.
learn from masters and then at a certain point you bring your own mastery into it. And it's not,
Yeah.
you know, it's what I always tell my students, discipline over time will get you where you want to go.
Mm.
But the sound,
Definitely.
because they are nonverbal and because they're not directing you. I mean, I'm listening to a lot of podcasts recently with some very successful and brilliant people, well-trained minds, thoughtful and whatever. And at this point, it's like, it's not that it's wrong, but it's blah, 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 because it's not going to help the situation that we find ourselves in. We need to be strong. We need to be compassionate. We need to be decent. We need to fight, but that fight has to come from clarity inside of us, not just flailing around or reacting.
Mm.
I have faith and I have hope that the future will be better than it has been for the past 8,000 years with less judgment, less hatred, less violence. I have hope for that. And
Mhm.
by the way, that hope is supported by a lot of the prophecies from the ancient times, including, not just the stuff coming out of the prophets of old, like Ezekiel or Daniel, but also from the Hopi Indians. They all say that
Mhm.
the world is emerging, and the Hopis are not the only indigenous tribe that have that philosophy.
Good.
They see an emergence of something better, and we have to
Mm.
contribute to that.
Mhm. Good.
So I will now make some different sounds for calm and compassion, very important compassion.
I think we'll stop here. Thank you for your presence, for the sound, for sharing this knowledge and your experience with us today. We look forward to have you again for more discussion and maybe a Q&A if any of the audience has some question. We will have a follow-up Q&A um, in the next few days. And yeah, any last words before we close up?
Well, I just wish everybody the best. Blessings.
Thank,
So you need to be very solid. This is like being on a roller coaster.
thank you so much, Shulamit.